Pastor? Okay. Let's wait just a minute here while Pastor Cash does his thing. We are ready to go. We are live. Kathy, why don't you open us up with a word of prayer?
Father, thank you that we've made your house tonight. Lord, I just pray that you would just give us words that we need to hear. Lord, I just pray that we would have open hearts to receive it. In Jesus' name.
All right, very good. We're recording. We are on. We have something exciting going on in the church as we speak, and we pray that all will turn out well with that. And welcome to our viewing audience this evening. We've been discussing over the past few weeks the consequences of the fall. More to the point, our sin nature. And we've been talking about the curse, the sin nature, and what is fundamentally wrong with us. There's something, this sin nature and the curse tells us that there's something very, very wrong with what's going on with us. So where we want to start is the sin nature, and I'm going to do a little bit of a review here. Now, the sin nature, the foundation of the natural belief system, we talked about a couple of weeks ago that the sin nature has four fundamental roots. We have this guilt, which is our inner paranoia because we were made in the image of God, and we know we have offended God because, again, we were made in his image, which is a very, very deep topic. And then we have shame, which is the deep-seated regret that we have indeed offended God. And, you know, it's that unresolved deep root, that shame that we have. And again, Tim Keller, in that fabulous sermon I've mentioned several times, he talked about in New York City, his observation was he would walk into some of these major large bookstores and he would talk about how he would see book after book after book about shame and why we felt so bad about ourselves. And again, our deep root of understanding that something is really wrong. And again, that shame, that deep-seated regret that we've offended God. And it's that, and then we talk about insecurity, our natural worry, our anxiety, our issues of chaos, if you will, that underlying chaos. We've been separated from God. And that gives us a very fundamental question: who's going to take care of me? We live in a world that's very uncertain, very chaotic, and we need someone to keep on, we need something to grab onto as our security. And then we have idolatry, which is false worship. And what that is it's our innate need to seek what's going to bring us security. So our idolatry is that, is manifested when we worship anything other than God. Okay? We're going to worship what we believe will bring us security. Okay? We're going to worship what we believe will bring us pleasure. We worship what we think will resolve our deepest need. And that's really where we're going here. Because we like to think through it all that we're pretty reasonable, decent people. Okay? We're nice people. I try to be nice. I try to do the right thing. But the thing about it is, we still continue to live with this guilt and shame and insecurity and idolatry. And the reason why is because, yes, we tend to think of ourselves as people who want to do the right thing, and we do a lot of times, so that we're basically, pretty good people. But the comparison is Jesus Christ. The comparison is perfection. Now, Jesus resolves that problem for us and removes our guilt. But the thing about it is, it doesn't take away from this underlying idolatrous belief system that we have that causes us to live in fear, live in insecurity, live constantly wondering about what if, rather than taking on a true lifestyle that Jesus wants to take on, to walk in his footsteps. Now, last week we started talking about something called rebellion, idolatry. And these are idols, belief idols that came about because we fell, part of our rebellion against him. And we talked about, and let me talk first about, before we get into the review of that. So for the following 2 weeks, what we're going to do, next week we're going to start talking about need idolatry. The idols, the belief idols that we have based on our security and our needs. Tonight we're going to talk about pleasure, security, and entitlement. And last week we talked about pride, facade, and performance. And I'm going to review those very quickly. Then judgment and self-seeking. We're going to talk about that because those are the byproducts of our idolatry. We judge people, okay, and we are self-seekers. And if you look at Romans 2, where he talks about judgment and self-seeking, it brings on wrath, anger, trouble, and distress. And that's kind of the way that we live. That's kind of the way that, for many of us inside, is the way we live our lives. And the following week, we're going to finish this up after we talk about judgment and self-seeking. We're going to talk about something called the orphaned spirit. And what the orphaned spirit has to do, the orphaned spirit has to do with the notion that we feel like we've either been violated, betrayed, life isn't fair, this shouldn't have happened, this shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't have happened to me, this was unfair, life hasn't gone on exactly the way I thought it should be because everybody else in the world has been unfair, and that's true because we live in a sinful, fallen world. So we're going to talk about the orphan spirit, which is the logical conclusion of all these idols that we deal with. So with that as the background, the foundation now, let's talk about first the belief systems of idolatry. You know, Adam and Eve chose to rebel and disobey. That's what they did. They came under satanic control. And God's response was, he could have just literally destroyed us and said, you know what, I'm going to start all over again. But that's not what he did. That wasn't the point. God's response was to allow us an idolatrous belief system that undergirds and forms the foundation of our sin issues, like I've been alluding to. We have two belief systems, rebellion idolatry and need idolatry. And they're so ingrained in us that only Jesus can resolve the problem that's going on with us. And we're going to live with this sin nature the rest of our lives, whether we like it or not. But there is a road of sanctification where Jesus is going to take us down a road that's going to hopefully heal us and make us into totally different people than we ever thought we could be. And the first item we talked about is pride. I'm the authority. I control me. I'm the judge. Why? Because I'm better than you. That's what pride says. You know, and part of pride says, I can't allow you to see my weaknesses and my flaws. Okay? I can't appear vulnerable to you. Why? Because then you're going to think you're better than me, which you already do, and you're going to try and take advantage of me. Okay? So I have to, I can't allow you to see my weaknesses and my flaws. And because we were granted free will and choice, and part of our pride aspect, our pride idolatry, is the idea that even though we know God's superior to us, God kind of becomes, our consultant, okay? Well, it's okay if God has his input, it's okay if Jesus has his input into me. That's okay, but the final decision is up to me. So it's perfectly permissible for me, in my own idolatrous mind, to just say, well, I'll accept God's input in this, but with pride, I'm the one who's in control. Now, because I believe that I'm the one who's in control, I have to present an image that I'm better than you because I'm going to protect myself. Okay, facade means I have to present an image of myself so that you can't think you're better than me. And we talked about this, and this is really self-defeating. It's pretty silly because what facade basically says, if I put on a nice facade, I present myself in a really nice way, I'm going to be a nice guy, I'm going to make you think I'm doing all the right things. It's basically saying, the false belief is, I'm going to control what others think by the way I cover and present myself. And the bottom line of this is that I really believe I can control how others perceive me. And we see this in the fall, because Adam and Eve, what they did was they covered themselves in their own silly little way. God even had to do that for them by carving up animal skins for them and say, look, you need to cover yourself up decently. And what they were really doing was, once they fell, they saw each other as they really were. And now they're starting to judge one another. So they're trying to project an image. They saw each other as they really were. And the problem with facade is it's based on our perception of what other people think about us, and it actually allows others to control us from afar. So, in essence, we're really submitting to them. So that was 2, pride and facade. I'm in charge. I got to present an image of myself so that you can't think you're better than me. And then we had, third one was performance. And what this is again, if you look at Genesis 3, where Adam and Eve, they're going to go out there, and now they've got to supply for themselves, which must have been a terrifying prospect, because they're sitting there in the garden where everything is provided for them, but now they've got to go do that. They've got to raise the crops and, do all this other stuff. And what performance means, basically, this is the fundamental root of why we think we're pretty good people, because, after all, I do a lot of good things. I do nice things. I'm nice to people. I'm a good guy. I try and do all these good things. And basically, what you're really saying is, I'm going to control the conditions by which I enter God's house, because I'm a pretty good person. And like I pointed out last week, that's fundamentally the same as me going up to Brandon's house, knocking on his door. Hey, Brandon, let me in. Well, Brandon has no clue who I am, but I'm a nice guy, Brandon. You ought to let me in. And you're saying, but if Brandon came up to my house and I had no clue who he was, do you think I'm going to let him in? No. But I'm a really nice guy. I'm a good person. I do all the right things. I give money at church. I helped that little old lady cross the street last week. And that's the way we think. Because we're pretty good people, and occasionally we do some things. We do some things we probably oughtn't to do. But they're okay. They're not really bad. I've never murdered anybody. I've never, really hurt anybody or anything. So I'm basically a pretty good guy. Well, the problem with that is you're basically dictating the conditions by which you can get into God's house. And the problem is, the conditions is you have to be righteous. You have to be declared perfectly righteous. And then you have to walk in faithfulness. Matthew 24:14, I think it is, 24:13. Those who are righteous are the ones, those who are faithful till the end are the ones who are saved. I'm paraphrasing that passage, but that's what it really is. Belying. So we talked about pride. I'm in charge. I have free will. I'm really free to do whatever I want. God's okay. God can tell me what he thinks, and I'll take it under consideration, and I'll do that. Okay, then there's facade. But because I'm such a good guy, I'm going to present an image of what I want people to see of me. Okay, I'm going to make myself look good. And then performance. Yeah, I'm a pretty good guy. I do all the right things. And, I go 10 miles over the limit on occasion, but that's okay. I didn't get caught. So that makes it all okay. So those are the first three idols of idolatry. Okay, of rebellion, idolatry. Now, let's get into it for this week. The fourth idol I'm going to cover. There's 6 idols under rebellion, idolatry, and there's 6 idols under need, idolatry. So, fourth idol is pleasure. And the false belief here is, I need a temporary escape from the sinful, chaotic, and my own guilt and shame. And it's basically the creation of false intimacy and acceptance so that I don't have to reveal the real me. Okay? According to Romans 1, pleasure involves the refusal to worship God. That's the true definition of idolatry, the refusal to worship God. And we live in this, to relieve anxiety and chaos, we're going to seek some sort of pleasure to do that. And in this hookup culture, we're going to substitute intimate pleasure to meet our need for intimacy. And that's one of the bad things. That's one of the really horrendous things about this society. People who do this participate in this hookup society and the way we view these kinds of things anymore. What happens? They're putting the cart before the horse. They're not only putting themselves out there and in this physical union, but the thing is, they're not really covenantally involved. So the question becomes, if you've done this with others, are you going to do this with me? So there's a fundamental insecurity in there. And so when pleasure is substituted for intimacy, what happens? We can emotionally hide. We can come together and do what we want to do, but I don't have to really reveal myself to you. I don't have to put myself out there, because see, true intimacy involves the notion, this is me, are you going to accept me at my worst? Okay? Now, Kathy and I have been together for 35 years in a covenantal marriage. And what that means is that we accepted one another for better or worse, and Kathy got by far the worst end of this deal. But she accepts me. She accepts me. Even at my worst, she accepts me. And I accept her, even at her worst. Of course, she's never at her worst. Thing about it is, when we do this, when we participate in this pleasure principle, if you will, it's this illusion of intimacy. It's this illusion. And we don't have to reveal ourselves, and we can avoid being, quote unquote, judged. I don't have to really reveal myself. I can get a false intimacy out of this. And Romans 1 tells us, no matter how bad you think, how low we can go, you can go lower. You can go lower. Don't deceive yourself. And this is in line with facade, And if God won't make me happy, then I have the right to make myself happy. That's essentially what it is. Well, if you're not going to give me what I want, then I'm going to go ahead and make myself happy, because I got free will. I can do whatever I want. You're nice, you're a consultant, I'll consider what you want me to do, but I'm going to go ahead and do what I want. So what he's saying is that there's many unsaved out there who will turn to sheer depravity. There's no limit as to how low this thing's going to go. And Paul's extensive list in Romans 1 details just the gross immorality of hedonism. So pleasure, whereby we're going to seek intimate relations with one another as a substitute for true intimacy. And you're putting the cart before the horse. And what you're saying is that this is great because, I can do what I want to. I can achieve some sort of intimacy. But the problem is, when you do that, deep inside, you're not really revealing yourself. you're not really being accepted. See, that's the key to true intimacy. When you can show somebody the worst of what you are, and they still say, I accept you anyway. I'm going to accept you anyway. And for 35 years, this is what Kathy and I have had. True intimacy. Why? Because we're married in a covenantal relationship where we went before witnesses and committed to one another. And we've honored that commitment. So that's the fourth idol under rebellion, idolatry. The fifth idol is security. Human institutions protect me. Fundamentally, basically saying, well, if human institutions protect me, I can basically protect myself. And thinking that your safety lies in human institutions, there's a perceived protection afforded by the government or financial institutions. Okay, well, do you think that really worked if you were living in Seattle or Minneapolis right now? If you lived in the, what do they call it, the Chaz? That didn't seem to work real well, did it? People believe their security is in their jobs and their retirement accounts or other human institutions. But yet virtually every human institution, especially nowadays, fails on a daily basis. We need to pass a law so that this will never happen again. How many times you heard that? And yet what happens? We find new and different ways to offend in a moral society. How dare they lay me off? My security was in my job, you see. Oh, they'll never lay me off. They will never get rid of me. I remember years ago I was working before we moved down here. I accepted a temporary position while we were waiting to sell our house to move down here. And the factory that I was working at, what we did was we tested VCRs. Okay, and that was kind of cool. It was a little bit different. Well, the problem is, what really happened was they were going around, oh, they'll never move this place. We're too valuable, we're too this, with this, that, and the other thing. Well, we moved down here. I was talking to a friend of mine. They're going to close the place. They found a place in Mexico where they're going to hire them for $2 an hour. And that was true. That was true. Natural and man-made disasters plague our existence continually. Criminal activity is a fact of life, and we read about horrific abuses each and every day. And the list goes on and on. And the thing about it is, the awful and sobering reality is we live in a sin-ridden world whereby we are threatened in numerous ways each and every day. Yet we operate under the delusion that we're somehow insulated to one degree or another. And Peter says, don't be surprised by suffering. Do not be surprised by suffering. So that's the fifth idol under rebellion, idolatry. And the last one is entitlement. Because I have this pride issue, and because I have a free will, and because I'm better than you, I'm entitled to whatever you have, and how dare you have what, if you have something that I don't have, well, I'm better than you, I'm entitled to that. This is what happened with Adam and Eve. Okay, I should have what you have because I'm better than you, pride, I'm entitled to judge you. So what right do you have to something I don't? Eve gave in to temptation when entitlement pushed her over to the edge. And the tempter, said, started talking about the fruit. And Eve started to reason. And she says, well, God can have the fruit. Why can't I? after all, it looks pretty good, and it's, you know what? I can get wisdom out of this apple. So it entitled her to process and accept the proposition that this was okay to do, even though it was the one thing they weren't supposed to be able to do. But, so she could come out of godly authority. Despite the clear knowledge, God said you were going to die, although realistically, if you really think about that, she had no idea what death was. Neither did the angels. Neither did Adam. They had no clue. They were living in perfection. But she looked at the fruit, and entitlement stirred within her. Again, I repeat. She says, well, it looks okay, and after all, it's going to benefit me. So if I think it's okay, then what's the problem? God's the consultant, so he gave me this input that said, don't do this. But to Eve, it became a choice. But to Eve, it became this choice, right? Well, God said don't do that. Well, okay, but look. So I guess it's okay. How many of us have, if you have kids, don't touch the stove? What's the first thing most of them are going to do? Go touch the stove. This one's giggling here because she's probably done it. It's a good thing, sweetheart, because I never did that. Okay? I remember when our daughter Valerie was very little, and the first thing she did was she wanted to touch a plug. Okay? So this is time for an object lesson. Well, I went a little overboard. I let her try and get real close to it, and I yelled a little too loud, and she started to cry. But guess what? She never went after a plug again. So it can really be construed that what Eve believed was she didn't need God to meet her needs and wants. She believed the fruit would give her something that God would not give her. So the core false belief of entitlement is that I'm above you so that I should have what you have. I should at least have the same as everyone else. And it creates confusion and chaos because entitlement says I must have more than you because a facade says I got to look better than you. So that's our 6 idols for rebellion, idolatry. Next week we're going to start looking at the 6 idols of need, idolatry. We're going to do 3 next week, and then 3 the week after that. So, Mary, why don't you close us with a word of prayer?
Dear Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for the wisdom that you give to us, Lord, and the direction. Lord, we are so sweet today. Speak to our hearts. Continue to speak to us. In Jesus' name I pray.
Amen. Now, Nanette admonished me last week, and rightly so, because I forgot to say, if you're out there, do not turn that dial and do not click on that mouse to go anywhere else. Candace, unfortunately, my enforcer, isn't here tonight, so Nanette is going to come after you. So we're going to stay tuned to have Dr. Cash come and give us this evening's Bible study, and hopefully we'll be able to have some a worship service this evening. So y'all be blessed, and we'll have Dr. Cash shortly. Thank you very much.